Hi, welcome back to my channel, and this is the Procreate Basic Series. It's a 24 episode series where you will learn all the basics of Procreate, and today is episode 11. So today is all about the basics of how to color in Procreate. I will actually explain to you what is hue, saturation and brightness. This is a term you will see quite often in Procreate, and we will also explore how to pick colors accurately, and then I will teach you how to color and apply the color palettes. We will also learn some fun things like how to drop colors, recolor, and then using reference layers and clipping masks in our coloring process. So before we get started, remember to like, comment and subscribe. Let's get started!
So picking up from the last tutorial, we are going to explore more about colors. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the main three components of any swatch, which is hue, saturation and brightness. So we learned how to pick this from the color slider already last tutorial, and today we're going to go more in depth about what is hue, saturation and brightness and how we can control each component precisely. So when we talk about hue, we usually means color. So hue, if you say change the hue, it's the same thing as changing the color. And here we have a few samples of colors here that are changing in 3 scales. And then now we will talk about saturation, and when it comes to saturation, it's the same thing as vibrancy, or how neutral a swatch is, or how gray a swatch is. So if it's very saturated, it means that it's very vibrant, and if it's less saturated, it will be on the gray side. And the more neutral a swatch is, the more gray it will be. So this is a sample swatch here where the blue is going from vibrant to gray. So as long as it has some sort of gray in it, it is considered neutral and not vibrant. So this is the most vibrant color here because this is actually the most pure color here and has 0 gray in it. So how do we know if a swatch is really vibrant? So I'm just gonna pick this color and see here. So if it's on the right edge here, just snap to the right edge, it means that it is completely vibrant with 0 gray in it. And then this swatch here is right in the middle, so this already has some gray in it. And this one here is also completely vibrant because it's on the top edge, but it's very light in value. So this is how you can check how vibrant or saturated a swatch is. If I pick this color, you can see it snap right to the left side, which means that this is completely gray with no color at all. And if you pick something in the middle, you can see it's right smack in the middle with gray and blue add together. And now the last thing that we have to talk about is brightness. So brightness is the same thing as values, or how dark it is and how light it is. So when it comes to values, there are a couple of values here. So this is usually what people mean when they say the word values, is the scale of white to black. And sometimes they will give numbers to these values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But sometimes it can be reversed, like this can be 1 or this can be 1. So just bear in mind that when we are talking about values, you just have to remember a couple of things, which is this part here belongs to highlights, and this part here belongs to midtones, and then here of course is the shadows or the darks. So as long as you remember like these basic 3 categories, you will be fine when people refer to the highlight section or the midtone section or the shadow section. So now we have this same blue color changing in value. So when you see this scale, you can see that it's going brighter this side and going darker this side. And same goes for this as well, and same goes for this. So now if you look here at the bottom, here we have a long scale of color changing, and this is actually different from this color scales here because I wasn't actually trying to be cute and have a pastel color scheme here and then try to have another rainbow down here, but actually there's a point with it all. So the reason is this color scheme here consists of the purest color and is picked out from like pigment-like colors. That means if you buy traditional paint tubes, the colors will come out mostly like this. And if you are working traditionally, we have a rule. The rule is that this value here actually drops, becomes lighter here towards the yellow, and then gets gradually darker here, and then this is darkest, and then it goes back to lighter. so it's actually has an inherent value already, but some softwares can detect this, so Procreate actually does actually. So let's turn on hue, saturation and brightness. I'm going to turn down the saturation, so you can see that yellow here is actually brightest and it goes darker towards blue. So at the purest color of yellow, it is very light. At the purest color of the purple blue, it is very dark. So in this sense, you can also create an artwork using just this color scheme because it has values already. This is also why people say that Van Gogh has a saying, if there is blue, there must be yellow. So because blue is the color of darkness and yellow is the color of light, so if you put both of them together and create like an artwork, you can actually already depict light in that sense. So this is a good theory for you to understand that when you're changing colors, the values changes as well. So now I'll tell you how to pick colors from this color picker here. So let's say I'm gonna start from blue. So let's say I'm in blue right now and I want to pick the yellow here. If I just simply slide my hue slider right up here to yellow, this will actually be the color that I will get. And you can see it's completely different, but why is that so? It's because these three scales, I've actually made it in such a way that only the color changes, there are no value changes, and there are no saturation changes. So this is picked out particularly to avoid changing in value or saturation. So let's see if I'm correct. If I turn down the saturation, I get a flat value all across, and this is all flat. But you can see here the new yellow that I just picked just now is a bit brighter. So what this means is, if you're simply just picking color and sliding this slider around, your value will change and you won't be able to pick a color without changing the value or sometimes even the saturation. So you need to be able to pick a color and just change the color without changing the other two values. And this is very important because you need to be in control of all three components here. So now I'll teach you how to do this. So if I pick blue, so now I have blue here in this swatch. I'm going to tap on this brown swatch and pick blue again. So now I have blue on these two swatch now. I'm going to change it to yellow now. And I can see that this yellow is clearly lighter than this blue. So I need to make this yellow darker a little bit. So I'm going to slide it. But I want my color to be vibrant. So I'm guessing that it's somewhere around here. And I'm going to paint it down and see if I'm correct. I think it's still too light, so I'm going to push it even more. Yep, so now it's exactly the same value. How do you know if it's the same value? So let's see. Just now I have this color, and if you zoom in real close, if I put them next to each other, you can see that there's a gap of change. And this is lighter and this is darker. But if I use the correct one, and I put them next to each other and it's touching each other, you can barely see it and it seems to vibrate in your eyes. And this means that there are no value changes if it starts to vibrate. You can essentially paint it all over here and see a vibration going on. And you can tell that it's the same value. So this is how you can change color without changing the value itself. So similarly, if I am right down here, so this is actually a bit more gray. So how do I change the color? So first I make sure that both my swatches is red so I can compare them. And now I pick either one and I'm going to slide it to green. And I can obviously see that this is super bright. So I need to match this. And this is a little bit gray. So I need to match the grayness as well because I don't want the saturation to change. So I think here is about right, and let's test it out. So you can smudge it to see if it works. And you can see that when you smudge it, there are no changes in value or saturation. So this is how you can pick colors without changing the saturation or value. And now we're going to go on to saturation and how we pick colors. So I want to change this color to be the gray blue, but in the same value and the same color. So it's simple, we don't move this slider, so we don't change the color. We just have to figure out how to get to gray. So to go gray, we just have to go left. So let's pick the same color here so we can compare first. And now let's pick the color and slide left. So if I slide left, all the way left, just straight line across, I can see it's getting brighter, and this is not what I want, so I need to go down. So let's go down first and try and match the value. I think that this is the value roughly, and let's test it out. And if I smudge it, I can see that it is smudging, and then you can't tell the difference at all because there are no value changes or color changes. So this is just a change in saturation and how you can pick colors this way. And back to brightness. Brightness is simple because if we want to just pick a brighter color, we just have to move towards the top here, and we want to get darker, we have to move down. So it's just an up-down motion. But now our color here, blue, is at this corner. So even if we move it all the way up, we don't get to white. So we need to slowly move towards this direction to get to white without changing the saturation itself. So usually if you have a strong color at the top here, I would move in a diagonal fashion. I would head towards here. So I'll keep picking here, 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 here. And if I want darker, I'll just go all the way down. Same goes for colors like this. So this color here is right smack in the middle. So how do we go brighter? We would go in diagonal fashion like this to go brighter. And to go darker, I'll go diagonally all the way down here. And of course, as you're doing it, you're constantly checking if the saturation or the colors are changing. So this is how you can change values within the color picker, and try not to depend so much on these few sliders because these are just numerical sliders and sometimes it might not be visually correct, something like in this case. So you can't just change the slider and hope that the color will change and the other two doesn't, because it does not work that way. You always have to just rely on your eyes. So all this is great in theory, but how do we apply it when we are painting a portrait? So to paint a portrait, you can't expect to have an all-in-one palette here with correct hue, saturation and brightness, because the possibilities are like endless. There are so many skin tones, it's impossible to get there. So but what you can do is to compress everything down into two palettes. So the first palettes that you always need to have is the grayscale palette. Here we have neutral black, cold black and warm black that you can use to create the value painting of your artwork. So when you create your value painting, you will have something like this. Okay, once you have this already, you can apply a second color palette. So I usually have this easy skin tone palette. You can download this from my website. So this skin tone palette will only apply the hue and saturation onto the painting, disregarding the values in this palette. We are not going to use values from this palette at all. We are only going to use the color and the saturation from this palette. So we don't have to worry about this messing this up. So if I apply this easy skin tone palette on top of this grayscale, this is what will happen. So this layer is actually painted with just the easy skin tone palette, and I'm going to apply this to the grayscale painting below. So to apply it, I will just change this to color, and it will immediately just color the painting. And if I continue to work on it, it will look something like this. So in that way, I separate my palettes into two so that I can always consistently get the same results every time. So this is how you can plan your color palette and have color palettes that work for you all the time. So all this color palette that I have, like this, is all arranged in values, which I will use to build up values. And this kind of palette is called highlights, which means I will use this with the blending mode add. And for lip palette, this is basically the same thing as the easy skin tone palette, where I just want the hue and saturation to apply to the painting, disregarding the value. And for the tints for highlights and tints for shadow, these have to be applied with a blending mode, and this blending mode will be applied with add, and this one will be applied with multiply. So I'll go into blending modes and special brushes later on in the series. So this is how I structure all my color palettes to accommodate all my portrait painting and be consistent throughout all of them. So if you would like to try out this method, you're welcome to develop this method even more. So right now we're going to talk a little bit about something lighter and something fun. So let's talk about dropping colors. So right now I'm gonna have 2 circles here. So this is my first circle and this is my second circle. So I'm gonna drop a color inside them. So let's pick blue. And to drop a color is really simple. You just have to drag the color from the color picker onto the painting itself and it will fill it up for you. And let's try and drop it to the second one. So you see now it's not filling the circle at all, and the reason for this is because there is a gap here. So if there's a gap in your line work, you won't be able to fill your artwork cleanly. So if I just drop it and it will just color everything until it hits the next boundary. So make sure that you have a closed path before you drop any colors. And now let's talk about how to recolor a painting. So let's say I have a grayscale here and I want to quickly drop in a color. Let's pick a color from my skin tone palette. So I'm going to drop it here and you can see there's a color threshold here at 36%, and if I drag it left or right, you apply even more towards the right side. So you can also use this method to quickly drop in color and to continue working on your portrait. And the last thing that I want to cover today is reference layer. So right now I have a completed painting already, but I don't want to keep this color layer anymore, and I want to recolor this entire portrait entirely. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit this color layer here, create a layer above, and I'm gonna set this color layer as reference. So what this does is if you drop in colors here, you automatically just apply the layer to the reference layer below, which is useful for you to continue working on a painting. But this feature does not work if you are painting over it, so it does not maintain the same thing. If you want the same thing to work while you are painting it, you actually have to remove the reference and change this new layer into clipping mask. Then you can paint and then remain within the boundaries of the layer below. I'll go into much more detail later on in one of the videos in this series.
Okay guys, I hope you learned a lot about coloring in today's tutorial. For tomorrow's tutorial, we'll be learning all about adjustments. So remember to catch tomorrow's tutorial. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe. Bye!